What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you yet again. Still no voice. Feel like ass. I wake up, have less of a voice than I did last night. I don't know when I'm going to get over this, man. This is bad. I know I don't sleep, but thanks for all of you who are hanging out in the NFL show last night. I have two NFL plays today, and I'll remind you what those are. You can go back and watch the NFL show to see the analysis on those games, and I actually talked about every single game on the slate this time. My plays are the Atlanta Falcons plus 1.5, New York Jets plus 2. Although I think with the Jets, the best number you can get now on the Jets, I think is probably about plus 1, plus 1.5, but not a huge difference in football, obviously. Anything under the field. Actually, the Jets have moved to a favorite now, so may want to get a little bit creative in how to play that, but I don't mind laying the -1 with the Jets either. The indicators are that the line is moving in my direction, so there we go. And Atlanta's sitting at plus 1 right now. It looks like, looking at the market read here. Well, actually, let me share my screen, I guess, and then we can see what's going on here. Excuse me. Market read looks like, we've seen more of a shift here as far as the cash percentage, indicating still on the Falcons side. There were less of the cash on the Chargers, so that looks good. Seahawks, Jets, same thing. Very public Seahawks team with less of the cash, and the line moving back in the direction of the Jets. So I like the way the market is panning out on those. Let's talk about the rest of the sports here. I'm going to add one hockey play and just leave it at that. Trying to be selective. College basketball, I don't want anything to do with this college basketball slate here today, man. I mean, just a lot of stuff in the undercard. I will just point out quickly that, like, there are teams like Penn State. Penn State just had their first loss of the season, I think, against Clemson. And then they have Big Ten play starting up in a couple of days. So when you suffer a first loss like that and it's against a big conference opponent like that and it's a pretty close game, that can, tend to have a hangover effect. And then they may be looking ahead to this big game against Purdue to start conference play. Problem is, this is a giant mismatch between them and Buffalo. So do I really want to try to come in and take the points with Buffalo? And I think Penn State is a fast-paced team too, even though they're not the greatest Big Ten team. But no, I mean, I think it's too much of a mismatch, so I just don't want to do it. Penn State up from 26 to 28.5. Buffalo, 50% of tickets, 81% of the cash. So it does look like the cash percentage is on the Buffalo side. But again, like, there's no way I want to come in and touch that. And same goes for Xavier. I think they just had their first loss of the season against Michigan in their first really big step-up game. Although you could argue Wake was as well, I guess. Those two big opponent games there. And then they do have TCU up in a few days, which is another big conference opponent with South Carolina State sandwiched in there. So it is a sandwich spot. But again, another mismatch. The line has moved up from 23.5 to 25.5 on Xavier with juice. 67% of tickets, 88% of the cash. So again, I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to stay away. And then I just found it to be kind of hilarious that San Francisco is up from 21.5 to 29.5 with heavy juice. It looks like they're going to be 30.5 by the time this game kicks off. It looks like there is some legitimate money coming in on the San Francisco side. It's just crazy to see like lower conference team, like a mid-major team like that, being a 30-point favorite against almost anyone, like a team that's not like Gonzaga or something like that at the very least. But Mercyhurst is new to FBS this year. It's hilarious because they actually are 4-4 right now. I think in San Francisco's like 5-2 or something like that. So this just looks like a crazy high line, but I think it's probably justified. I think San Francisco, as I mentioned, is possibly a competitor to Gonzaga in their conference this year. They're looking like they're a pretty good team this year, man. And Mercyhurst, completely new to Division I basketball. I don't think they're as good as they've looked so far this season, so it's just hilarious to see a line like that. Let's move over to NBA. My one play is going to be in hockey. So NBA, we do have a couple of games that kind of have my interest at the very least, but I'm not going to play any. Unfortunately, both of my NBA leans that I talked about on the show last night were correct sides. They were winners, with the Charlotte Hornets covering, although they were losing the game by more than the spread for a little while. But they hung in there. They covered against Atlanta in the letdown spot off of back-to-back wins over the Cavs. And then the Philadelphia 76ers won in a blowout against the, who do they play? The Detroit Pistons, I think. That was a lean of mine as well. I should have played that one. That was the stronger of the two, in my opinion. And man, I'm kind of mad I didn't play those, but this is what you get when you're really selective. You'll have a lot of thoughts about a lot of these games, and a lot of them will be correct, but that's just the way it goes. Magic and Nets, there are some interesting angles in this game. Magic are down from 8.5 to 6.5 with juice, so market looks like the money has come down towards the Nets, but then you see the Nets have 83% of the tickets and 70% of the cash. I have no clue why the Nets would be public in this game. I don't really even necessarily buy that that's even true, because why would the public be coming in on the Nets? Orlando is really hot right now. The Nets suck, so I just don't get it, other than the fact that, of course, oh, well, no, I don't even know what I was going to say. I don't think there's any really redeeming quality of the Nets, other than they sometimes play some of these better teams close, is kind of what I was thinking about, because I was thinking about the Nets playing the Celtics close, basically. My Celtics. I had that in mind. The Orlando Magic, I mean, they just beat Brooklyn in the same scenario, and the Magic were 7.5-point favorite in that game. So the Magic now have to turn around and repeat that same game, and then they have the New York Knicks up next, which is obviously a bigger game than playing Brooklyn. So the Magic could take Brooklyn a little bit more lightly this time, because they just blew them out in the same scenario, in the same venue at the Barclays Center, and now they have the Knicks coming up next. Could be a look ahead, but the Knicks finally seeming like they're turning it on a little bit now. They are one of the better teams in the NBA, so it's a zigzag type of spot where I would look to maybe grab the points with Brooklyn here, but it looks like the market looks way out of whack here, man. I don't understand why the Nets look like they're public, or why they have less of the cash than the tickets. That doesn't, jive with my thinking, but also you're getting less than you did in the previous game. The Magic were 7.5 in the first game, and now it's only 6.5, 7. I mean, it's not a huge difference. If you were going to force me to play this game, I would still grab those 7 if there's a 7 out there with the Nets, because 7 is a key number in basketball, because it's that 3-possession threshold where teams stop intentionally fouling. But I'm just not going to do it. The market just looks way strange to me. But again, Magic could take Brooklyn lightly again, because they just blew them out in this exact same venue, and they have a bigger game up next against the New York Knicks. As far as these other games, Celtics-Cavs obviously is the biggest game on deck here. That's a huge game. It is going to be multiple revenge for the Cavs here. Celtics down from 3 to 1, 78% of tickets, 68% of cash on the Celtics. So the Celtics are public this time, unlike in the first game. First game between these two teams, the Cavs looked a bit like a public road underdog, because the Cavs were undefeated at that point. The Celtics had a couple losses. Celtics won the game, and they actually won it more easily than what it looked like. The Celtics were blowing the Cavs out of the building in that game. I mean, I was there. I was in attendance for it. So that's one thing where you could say, well, that result was actually misleading, and the Celtics actually completely handled the Cavs. So that would be one reason to maybe look to the Celtics here. But other than that, I don't really see it. If you forced me to play this game, I would have to play the Cavs, even though I really would not want to, and I don't want to see that happen. But the line is obviously moving in the direction of Cleveland. The market indicators are on the side of Cleveland. If the Celtics were like a 4.5 point favorite at home, this line should be about maybe a pick 'em or so in this game, or Celtics -1. So the line looks about right to me in this game, although arguably in that first game, the Celtics were maybe undervalued a little bit in that game. But the Celtics, I mean, they should be focused as well on this game. They're not just going to not be focused against one of the better teams in the conference, the team that everybody's saying is their biggest competition in the conference. So both teams are going to have reasons to show up here. Celtics, like I said, they could overlook the Bulls in that previous game, and the Celtics won still, but they didn't cover, which I think is one good sign for the Celtics, that it's just kind of a momentum continuing win coming into this game, so not a bad win. Celtics do have the momentum right now. Cleveland does not have momentum, but because they just lost both those games to Atlanta, I think they were looking ahead to this game against Boston, man, even though Atlanta beat them in that first game, and I expected maybe Cleveland would show up and try to beat them back on the road, but I just think they were just looking ahead to the Celtics game again, so I don't think there's that much to take away from that. I expect focus on this game, obviously, so Cleveland is in a bounce-back spot here, and Cleveland, of course, now has double revenge because, as we all know, the Celtics were the team that eliminated them from the playoffs last year and ended their season. Cleveland also just lost in Boston, so there are more reasons, I would say, to take Cleveland here than to take the Celtics, but I do not want to do it. Cleveland also did pick the Celtics off in this building last year at one point, a game that I was on Cleveland. I remember I took like +9 with Cleveland or something because I think the Celtics were coming off that ridiculous blowout where they beat Golden State by like 60 points. So I was like, nope, I'm gonna fade the Celtics here and grab the Cavs. And the Cavs won that game outright. I think the Celtics actually were blowing the Celtics out. Or excuse me, the Celtics were blowing themselves out. No, the Celtics were blowing the Cavs out in that game, I think. And the Cavs made a huge comeback. The Celtics, I think, just took their foot off the gas, basically. I don't know. But I don't know if I have any other thoughts on that game. But that's basically it for that one. Not playing the game, as I said. Any other games here that really are of interest? I don't know. I mean, the Knicks are returning home from a road trip. So they would be considered to be kind of in a bad spot here, but they are coming off a close win over a bad Charlotte team. I don't know. They do have Orlando up next, and Orlando's hot right now. So that is a bigger game up next. So it's not the greatest spot for the Knicks. I mean, this is a long road trip. They were gone for over a week, significantly over a week, basically, and they went out into high elevation, basically into the mountain time zone. So Knicks are probably going to be in that dreaded return home distracted spot there, but it is a 12-point line there, down from 12.5. 91% of tickets, 93% of the cash. So I don't buy that cash percentage, though. I mean, I would only look to take the points with the New Orleans Pelicans in that one, although I don't really want to do it. Pelicans also have a lot of these weird injury issues, though. CJ McCollum has been back for a while now, and he's maybe finally starting to adjust to playing again, and the team might be adjusting to playing with him again. So the Pelicans are not as injured as they were a little while ago. Zion Williamson is still out, but Pelicans are at least not a total shell now with Trey Murphy the third, whoever the third, and CJ McCollum both back, at least with Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram are both still out for them. Thunder Rockets is a big game. Thunder down from 3-1, 1.5, I guess, is a road favorite. 86% of tickets, 96% of the cash. So the Rockets look like they're public, which kind of surprises me. I don't really think that that's really the case. They do have the public, they do have the cash percentage on them, which I do buy that. I do believe that, especially because the line has moved in their direction. Do I want to really fade OKC in this spot? Not really. I mean, I know I took Houston against them earlier in the season, and Houston did not cover that number. I thought OKC was in a sandwich spot between Denver and Golden State, but they took Houston seriously there. Will they take them seriously here? I don't know, because Oklahoma City is rolling on this road trip, and this is already a successful road trip, blowing out Sacramento, beating Golden State, and beating the LA Lakers. So will they actually maybe not totally focus on Houston here for that reason? I don't know, maybe, because this is the last game of the road trip, and they're already 3-0 on the road trip. Excuse me, but they don't have a bigger game up next. And Houston has been playing really well, so they may continue to take Houston seriously here. And Houston is actually right behind them record-wise. So I see reasons maybe why OKC will still show up here. Houston, of course, will also still show up here. They have a lot of rest. They're returning home from a road trip, which took them to Minnesota and Philly. Kind of a weird 2-game road trip there, but I don't know if it's going to be a return home distracted spot. They do have extra days off here. They've had a few days off, so they are going to be the more rested team, which may help actually after 2 overtime games. And maybe they're a little bit embarrassed off of that overtime game against Philly. I played Philly in that game, actually, and they missed by like 1.5 points as a 5.5-point underdog. I'm kind of pissed about that. That should have been a cover for me. Houston was in a sandwich spot in that one between a big overtime win over Minnesota and this game against OKC. So I do expect they're going to be focused on Oklahoma City. I mean, you return home, you may have those like return home distractions. You have to do Thanksgiving because this return home was right before Thanksgiving. So you have to do that. You have a lot of home stuff to get out of the way. But is Houston going to not pay attention to Oklahoma City coming into their house? I don't think so. I think they will be focused on that game. So I'm not going to play the game. And finally, I guess I would maybe lean against the LA Lakers here. I mean, this was maybe the closest to me having a play here. I think LA is maybe in a spot where they might overlook Utah. This is similar to that sandwich spot I just said that I thought that Houston was in that game against Philly. The LA Lakers just came off a close loss against Oklahoma City. I mean, that's a tough game, man. They returned home for one game against OKC, and OKC is a physical defense, man. I mean, you're going to get beat up when you play OKC, so that's not the greatest game to be coming off of. And now they start a road trip, though. So starting a road trip is usually a focus spot. But when they have Minnesota up tomorrow, I'm not so sure that it really is going to be a focus spot there. I think maybe they will overlook Utah because it's surrounded by better teams. Utah, on the other hand, I mean, they need to get a win of some kind right now. I mean, they're just playing bad basketball again. But they're coming off, I guess, another tough opponent here in Dallas. But they're just kind of staying at home. They do still need a win at home. This game wasn't really that close. So my lean is to Utah. I'm kind of tempted to play it, except that Utah is on a back-to-back. So they did play Dallas yesterday. But they're not traveling, and they do probably want to get one win to kind of try to salvage the rest of this homestand, although they did win against New York in the first game of the road trip, first game of the homestand, but I don't know. Lakers are up from 7.5 to 7.5 with juice, though, and 89% of the tickets on the Jazz, 84% of the cash. I don't buy that either. How could the Jazz possibly be public? A 4-15 Jazz team look like one of the worst teams in the league against the LeBron Lakers? I don't think so. I really do not think the Jazz are actually the public team in this game, so I don't know what's going on with this pregame screen here. I don't buy it. I would look to take the points with Utah, but I don't quite want to do it there, but it does look like the spot to do it. Moving over to NHL, we got a small NHL card. I mean, it's one of these Sunday cards. I do lean to Boston, my Boston Bruins, and I almost wanted to play this, and if you do, I would recommend that you just lay the -1.5 puck line in this one, because that's the way you can get the best value, I think, because you can lay that as like a spread bet and get like +110 on it or something like that. So it's basically like laying the points, laying a spread there, because Boston's up from -220 to -230. 75% of tickets, 93% of the cash. It does look like the money is coming in on the Boston side, and I do agree with it. I would only look to play Boston in this game. My one hesitation is that Boston, I mean, even after they fired their coach, their offense has not turned it around yet, even though I know they're 3-1 since they fired their coach. 3-1 or 3-2. Let me see. Maybe they're 3-2. Yeah, they're 3-2, since they fired their coach. But look at their their scoring output, man. 1, 2, 0, and 1. And then 6 in one game against the Islanders. So their offense, really, it seems like they have not figured out their offensive woes yet, although Montreal, a team that doesn't play great defense, so the Bruins hopefully will be able to score in this one. I do lean to the Bruins because they're in a bounce-back spot, I think, coming off an ugly loss to Pittsburgh at home. Pittsburgh not playing very well this year, even though I know they're Sidney Crosby, they're the name team, but the Bruins offense just continuing to struggle, only putting up one goal in that game against Pittsburgh, just miserable offensive output from the Bruins. They continue to be terrible on the power play. They continue to not be good on the penalty kill. I don't know what's going on with this team because they do still have similar talent to what they had the last couple of years. And I think trading DeBrusque away was probably a problem because he was kind of that like next man up type of guy there that was really a big piece. I don't know, man. I don't like what's going on there. But I would still lean to the Bruins in this one because the Bruins, they do also have a day off. I think they're in a bounce-back spot. Montreal, I don't think they're in a great spot. They just played the Rangers tough yesterday, and they're playing a third straight road game now. That was a big game against the Rangers for them, man, and they're now in the second leg of a back-to-back after they definitely put in an all-out effort here, and they lost to the Rangers on a power play in the final 30 seconds on a power play goal. In the final 30 seconds of the game after they had the Rangers tied. That's kind of brutal, man. And they had come back from down 3-1 going into the third period. To lose a game that way, I mean, that's bad. So I think that they're going to be in a hangover spot after that, a letdown spot. Even though the Bruins are one of their original 6 rivals, the Bruins have not really been an intimidating presence, really. I think it's a tough spot for Montreal, so I would look only to the Bruins side in that one for all those reasons I just said. The hesitation, like I said, is that the Bruins' offense has still been pretty bad, so do you really want to bank on them winning by multiple goals in this game? I mean, they should win the game, but by 2 or more goals, it's a little bit dicey, I would say. So I'm going somewhere else here. What's up, Jacob? Thanks for hanging out, man. I'm going to give out my one play, and then I'm going to get out of here. Well, maybe, actually, I'll talk Winnipeg-Dallas real quick, I guess. Dallas up from minus 135 to minus 141. This is kind of the biggest game on the hockey slate today, I guess. 69% of the tickets and 64% of the cash on Dallas. So Dallas is public with less of the cash on them, even though the money line looks like it's moved in their direction a little bit. I mean, this is a big Western Conference game between two of the better teams in the Western Conference, obviously. The Jets have started to struggle as of late, man. I mean, they lost 3 out of their last 4 games. Who would have thought? And they're finishing a road trip now, so they may be a little bit fatigued at this point. This is a long road trip, man, that they've been on since November 22nd. But they may want to try to even the road trip here because they haven't had a successful road trip. They're only 2-3 on the road trip, so I could see this going both ways. I mean, of course, they're going to be focused on Dallas, but they may be a little bit tired at this point, and they just came off a big game against the Vegas Knights, man. This is a close game. They lost the game late in the game. It was tied late in the third period there, so that's a pretty tough game to be coming off of. Now they have to turn around and play another tough game against Dallas, so I don't really want to come in and grab Winnipeg, even though I know you're getting them now at a pretty tempting, fairly substantial underdog price here. I just still don't want to do it. Dallas, they're coming off a nice win over Colorado, which was a nice win as well. They did it in a return home spot, too. Although at least you could say they were in a bounce-back spot after an ugly loss to Chicago. And they were probably not going to overlook Colorado, man. I mean, Colorado, still one of the better teams in the West. So they're coming off of a nice win, but now they have to turn around and play another big game. So both teams are kind of playing 2 straight big opponents in a row. Big games in a row, so they both should be focused on this game, in my opinion. And other than that, I just don't know how to read this game necessarily. You might say that, well, if both teams are playing 2 big games in a row, well, doesn't that mean that you'd want to look to the over because the defenses are going to be tired? In this game, I don't know if I necessarily think that because I think that when both teams, I think, are in kind of a bad spot and one team might, overlook the other, or both teams might, overlook the spot or something like that. But in this case, neither of these teams are going to overlook this. So they're still going to try to come out with intensity in this one. So I don't really think that about this game. I just don't know how I would play it. You have a good day as well, Jacob. Hopefully I can get over this illness quickly here. And let's go to my one play, and then I will get out of here. And that's the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Columbus BJs, minus 130. They've actually started playing decent hockey after I was making fun of them, being like, oh, they're a low-tier team. Then, of course, they embarrassed my Bruins, which was the catalyst for the Bruins firing their coach, winning in Boston 5-1 or 6-1 or whatever it was. Columbus, looks like there's heavy market indicators on the Columbus side, and I agree with it, and hopefully you can get a cheap price on this like I did. I think minus 130 is around where I would like to get this. You may have to go up into the 130s to get this, but I don't hate it. I mean, I'm going to play it. 65% of the tickets and 95% of the cash on Columbus. I wish I got them at the cheap minus 110, but they're soaring now up to almost minus 140, minus 139. Looks like the legitimate money is coming in on Columbus to drive the number up like this. But there is something to be said, man. I mean, you at least see that the market indicators are really strong in that direction when you see a market move like this. So at least there's that. So it does mean that you're almost paying for information at that point, basically, even though, yeah, you're losing a little bit of value by doing it, but you at least, the trade-off is you get more information, oh, I'm on the same side as the professional money, it looks like here. So hopefully, as long as that information is actually correct, if you can read the market correctly. Although, in this case, it's a money line, so really you just need them to win the game. So they don't need to cover a margin or anything like that. So hopefully this does happen in this game. Chicago, I think they're in a bad spot. This is a fade spot, in my opinion, even though it is a spot where it looks like the public is going to come in slightly on Columbus as well, because as you can see, Columbus actually has a winning record now. They actually have the better record than Chicago, but it looks like it's a case where the public is slightly on Columbus, but the money is agreeing with that side and coming in more heavily on Columbus. Chicago, they're coming off a couple of tough games in a row, man. I mean, they beat the Dallas Stars 6-2, as I just pointed out. That's a huge win. And then they went up to Minnesota for a single road game, and they played Minnesota tough as well. Whenever you play Minnesota, man, that's going to be a tough game there. And they lost the game after they were tied at 2 in the second period, and then they lost on a second straight Spurgeon goal late in the second period. They were hanging around, losing by 1 for an entire period plus in this game, and wound up losing the game 3-2. So that's pretty brutal, man, for Chicago to come off a game like that. Now they come back home off of that game. Not like it's huge travel or anything like that, but to face a Columbus team, it's not a very strong team. And then who do they have up next? Toronto. They have to go back out on the road and face Toronto, who's a pretty big opponent right now. And Toronto was playing well with Austin Matthews, their best player, hurt, and now he's back. So that Toronto team is pretty formidable. And then Chicago does have Boston and then Winnipeg and the Rangers all up after this. So if they're going to overlook an opponent, it's going to be Columbus in this stretch of games, in this opinion, in this situation, in this part of the schedule, in my opinion, I should say. I'm out of my mind here. And as far as Chicago's concerned, Marachik has played 4 straight games in net, so it looks like it's probably going to be Soderblom in this one, and that is probably a little bit of a downgrade. They lost their last 3 games that he played, giving up 3 goals, 4 goals, and 3 goals in those games. So if he is playing, that's more of a benefit to Columbus as well. And maybe that is part of the reason why some of the money has come in on the Columbus side is the goaltender selection here for Chicago. It's probably going to be Soderblom in this one, so you're probably going to get Chicago's worst goalie, but I think that helps Columbus in this game. Columbus, they're coming off a win over Calgary. They're playing really good hockey right now, man. I mean, they've won 4 out of their last 5 games, and I think losing to Montreal, kind of an ugly loss, but look what they were coming off of. They beat Tampa Bay and Carolina both in overtime and shootout after blowing out Boston in that game that I mentioned. I think they were in a letdown spot of those 2 huge wins, and they got caught by Montreal, and they had way too much time off coming into that game against Montreal. I don't know why I didn't play Montreal in that game. It seems like it's a spot where I probably should have played Montreal in that game. I don't know. I don't know what happened there, but then they came off that, and they bounced back nicely. They beat Calgary. Now they're starting a road trip with momentum. So I like a spot like that when you win that last game at home, and it's not really like a huge win or anything like that. It's just a win where you beat like an all right team, and then you take that out on the road with you. You're going to be focused on that first game of the road trip, man. And are they really going to be focused on Calgary in their next game when they just beat Calgary? No, I think they're going to be focused to try to get this road trip off on the right foot. So I think it's a positive situational spot for Columbus combined with a negative spot for Chicago. And then we'll have to see who Columbus is going to have in net here because it's been Merzlikins for a while. And he played in pretty much all of those big wins, although he didn't do very well. He gave up a lot of goals in those games, in a lot of them. So I don't really think it matters that much which one of their goalies is in net between him and Tarasov. They both kind of suck. So hopefully whichever one it is can just come in and play well enough and get the job done. So, I mean, I could see potentially looking to an over in this game as well, just because you're going to have a pretty bad goaltending matchup in this game. And it does look like the money is headed in the direction of the over. 6.5 juice to the under now with less juice on the under. 86% of the tickets, 97% of the cash on the over in this one. So, those are my thoughts on all of that. That's my additional play on the Columbus Blue Jackets, minus 130. My other plays today in the NFL are Atlanta Falcons plus 1.5, New York Jets plus 2. I want to get them, man. I want to get some wins here. I'm coming off a winning day, but it was a 5-3 day and not a 6-2 day, as I was talking about last night. Total bullshit, man. I mean, I was 3-2 in college football with UL Monroe. I'll just go over it one more time, even though I went over it last night. I have a little bit of time. UL Monroe, I mean, they blew it for me, man. They were hanging in that game for a while, in under the number there, and they were still within 1 score of the number when the game ended, and they had chances to do it, man. It was just bullshit. They threw an interception in their own territory early in the game, handing Louisiana a touchdown, which did not help either, so that probably should have been a cover for me. I got easy wins, I think, in a couple of or no, not easy, but Western Kentucky won for me in a close game. LSU was an easy win, even though Nussmeier, their quarterback, got injured in the first quarter. I was thinking, oh boy, here we go. But they still won easy against Oklahoma in a bad letdown spot. So LSU was a nice, easy win for me. Western Kentucky, like I said, won in a close game, but they were able to get there and get themselves into their Conference USA championship game, I believe, against the team that they just beat, Jacksonville State. So we'll see how that goes. And then Michigan State was a complete no-show, just shocking to me that Michigan State, when they have a chance to get their program back to a bowl after multiple years missing out on them, a proud program like Michigan State, unbelievable they didn't show up in that game with Rutgers having really nothing to play for because Rutgers is already bowl eligible. That was I don't understand it at all. That was crazy to me. And then what was those are all the games, right? So those were my 3-2 in college football. I think, yeah, I had LSU, Western Kentucky. Those were 2 wins. Oh, what was the third win? How do I not remember this? Michigan State was a loss. UL Monroe was a loss. I think I forgot to talk about it yesterday. Oh, UTSA. Yes. UTSA lost and covered against Army. I mean, they lost by 5 as a 6.5, 6, 7-point underdog. So they covered all those numbers. It was a close, low-scoring game. Debatably, UTSA had some opportunities to win that game, I think. Unfortunately, they didn't do it because I had a little bit on the money line. It would have been nice to get that money line cash, but obviously I'll take the cover in that one. UTSA, baby. And then my college basketball, both of those spots were nice yesterday. Ohio, easy win by margin there. And then Lehigh was a little bit dicey. I mean, they were losing throughout the first half, but then they were able to mount like a pretty substantial lead in the second half. And then that lead did start sliding a little bit, but they were able to get out of there with a win. So I'll take that as well. And then, as I pointed out last night, the hockey game, you got to be kidding me, man. This is one of the worst beats that I've had in a while, that over in Utah-Vegas last night. Utah scored 3 goals in the first period and then 3 more in the first 5 minutes of the second period, I think. Or maybe they scored 4 in the first period and then 2 in the first 5 minutes of the second period. Whatever it was, Utah by themselves had 6 goals in the first 25 minutes of ice time, basically. With 35 minutes of game left, so more than half of the game left, Utah by themselves had 6 goals, and all I needed was 1 other goal to be scored at any point by either team, and it never happened. 35 minutes, neither team scored a goal, no empty net goals. Vegas, I don't know what they were doing, man. They didn't put up that many shots in the game. You're losing by margin like that. You expect that at least you're going to try to finish the game and try to not embarrass yourselves and get yourselves back in the game, right? And start throwing a bunch of shots on net, and that probably one of those is at some point going to go through. But that never happened. It's fucking insane, dude. I don't think I've never had that happen before. Sitting around for 35 minutes, and I wasn't watching it because I was doing my NFL show last night, and I had the Oregon basketball game up on here. They won, as I thought that they did in that close game in overtime. I think crazy win. But sitting around for 35 minutes of a hockey game, needing just 1 goal to come through at any point from either team, and it never happens, that's fucking bullshit, man. If you told me going into that game that Utah was going to score 6 goals, I would have put my entire mortgage on the over in that game. I mean, that is just so, and not only that, but score 6 goals in the first 25 minutes of game time. Yeah, I mean, I would have bet everything I own on the over in that game. It's so fucking stupid. So I'm pissed. That's a bad beat. I'm not going to forget that one for a while. That's probably my worst. It's one of my worst hockey beats that I can ever remember. Probably is the worst. I mean, that's just insanity. Yeah, I know. You never know when that QB is going to go down. But luckily for me, LSU, I mean, they do a good job recruiting, especially on the offensive side of things. So I don't know who their quarterback is that came in, but I think he's a guy who knows the system. So luckily, they had a guy who can still perform, and he came in and he did pretty well. Their offense put up a lot of points in that game. So good thing there for that one. That's going to do it for me, man. Thanks for hanging out, Jacob, especially because you're the only one pretty much here. Let's get some wins today, man. A shorter card today, a little bit more selective today. Let's do it. Let's have a winning day. Have a good Sunday, everybody, and peace out. And let's get healthy again. I'm Tower Gang Toad, of course. Follow me on Twitter and go subscribe to the Tower Gang Patreon, patreon.com/Tower Gang. You get bonus content, pre-show, post-show. Hang out with us in a Telegram. Submit to the mailbag. And yeah, I mean, I think you might get discount codes for Top Lobster as well, or for his merchandise shop, something like that. Whatever. There are goodies that you get from subscribing to the Patreon, man. So it's a fun time. We're the most hilarious, offensive podcast ever to exist. So that's gonna do it for me. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Again, peace out and have a good Sunday.